Welcome to Talk to Me Tuesday on a Tuesday. I'm your host, Mari B. Welcome back to our last show of the sexual abuse series. We have done this series to educate anyone out there on how to be mindful of sexual abuse that goes on in our community. We highly encourage that you go back and watch the previous episodes as they may provide some type of education. Please be mindful that the show will contain adult themes, sexual abuse vocabulary, and may not be suitable for all viewers under 18. Viewer discretion is advised. Sexual abuse survivors often face challenges in overcoming their trauma. It takes courage to share their story and relive those painful memories. However, opening up and expressing your emotions can also be very powerful and relieving. Today, we will have a sexual abuse survivor tell her story and provide insight into the different emotions she felt. We understand this may help someone watching and having a voice. Our sexual abuse survivor will speak about what gave her hope and how she became an advocate for survivors. We would like to welcome Kim Case. It's a pleasure to have you on our show today.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
Thank you. So you've been so kind to allow us and for yourself to be transparent with your story that pretty much has changed your life. And since then, Kim, you have chosen to be a role model and empower other sexual abuse survivors that have had similar experiences. How has this journey as an advocate been for you so far?
Honestly, it's been empowering. I think there are moments that I've had to stop and reflect on my whys of putting myself in the shoes of an advocate. But after a situation like this occurs, you feel like there's a sacredness in it that only few can understand. And for me, stepping into that with other survivors, whether a similar situation or a little different, but a victimization or a loss, has allowed me to feel a connection and somehow feel bonded with them, even if I don't share that I'm necessarily a survivor. But I feel like we understand some of that same darkness that's come into our lives.
And we will talk at the end of the show and kind of wrap up of how that hope has been present in your life and how you found it. But before we do that, I want to begin by having you, Kim, tell us what happened on the night of June 5th, 1990.
Well, like many, kids at the age of 19, I had my entire life in front of me and had hopes and dreams. Was looking forward to being a flight attendant. So that was the path I was going down. I really liked to travel and I thought that would be exciting. I was working at a restaurant, as many do at that age. I was a waitress and worked an evening shift. And just things were good, and at the end of the shift I left to meet a friend for breakfast at another local restaurant to kind of recap, plan the next day.
Okay, so tell us about this type of story you would never think would happen in real life, honestly. So, did you know at any point or notice anything around you seeming a little bit different?
Well, when we left the restaurant, there was some kind of catcalling in the parking lot that was happening. You don't ever really think something bad is going to happen. So it wasn't an instant fear. It was more like, well, that is silly. What's going on? And Gina and I both we left the restaurant parking lot. She pulled out in front of me and I was the last. I remember driving down the road towards my home and I had the windows down and the air blowing. I was listening to music and just, again, thinking about my future, thinking about life, just really hopeful and excited about the future. I pulled into my neighborhood and it's kind of a windy little neighborhood. And so I went around the block and then, came back around, pulled into my driveway, and I'd had a garage sale like that the weekend before. So I had stuff in the garage. So I just pulled into the driveway and got out. And at that time I saw lights pulling up down the road. And so I really assumed it was Gina, thinking that she decided to stay the night with me rather than drive home, and got my things out of my car and kind of turned and I saw the car I saw the lights. They were shining at me, so I really couldn't see who was getting out of the car. And at that moment, one of the offenders grabbed me.
Wow. Okay. So during that time, Kim, did you notice when you were pulling up to your neighborhood that anyone was following you, or did you even have a feeling that those guys at that restaurant would even follow you to your home?
I didn't. And there are times when I have looked back on that and felt blame or shame as if I should have somehow sensed danger, or did I dismiss a feeling that I had? Um, and those are the things that haunt you because you wonder what could I have done differently to have stopped this. But honestly, I didn't. I think I was so focused on everything in front of me. And the next day, I was to babysit a friend's daughter, and I just think I was consumed with that. And so you know, I didn't think of those bad things. And when he grabbed me, it dawned on me instantly that they were from the restaurant. They had followed me. And so I was fueled by this, fright, instant terror. The fight was so bad because he was big and tall, and it was on a slanted, my driveway was like a hill. So we were kind of off balance, and I was screaming and caught his hand in my mouth. And so I started biting down, and he was yelling for someone to come help. So another person jumped out of the car, and it was just, the most terror I think of the entire event was the moment where they grabbed me, just not knowing what I could do to get away. And they dragged me into the car, and they pulled out kind of in front of my house. And, I'd always heard, gosh, if they take you from one place, probably means you're going to die. All those things were swirling around in my mind. And I tried to jump out of the car, Marty, and, they pulled me back in by my hair and slammed the door shut. And then they handcuffed me. And I knew that this was bad.
So let's talk about a little bit about that abduction. So how many men? Is it only men? Were there women involved too? Were present in the car to where you just knew you were pretty much outnumbered?
Right. There were just men. There were four men. They ranged from the age of about 19 up into late 20s. I didn't know that at the time, but I could tell they were a little older than me. And I could smell alcohol. I sensed that maybe there was some drugs. I knew that they were not in their right mind necessarily as far as being, incapacitated that way. And it was more scary because I knew that they were just acting out of this impaired state. And they were yelling at each other. They were pushing me around. They started hitting me because I was yelling, and the car was going all over the road, up and down uh, the off ramps. And I was honestly praying that maybe we would get pulled over because, I just knew that either it was going to end in a horrible crash or they were just heading off. I didn't even know what direction we were going.
So they handcuffed you to an individual, to the car. Where were you handcuffed to where there was no way out?
Yeah. At the first, I was handcuffed to one of the offenders in the back seat. So there were two in the back and two in the front. I think that was in order for them to subdue me and to let me know that there wasn't going to be an escape. Later in the event, in the 15, 16 hours that followed, they did handcuff me to a variety of different things to keep me, there. But at that moment, I was handcuffed to the offenders, and they started, sexually abusing me right away in the car. I was crying and telling them I was pregnant, which I wasn't. I was just trying to think of anything to say that maybe would stop them from harming my body. And, I made up a name. It was so interesting how my mind and my body tried to react and to save myself without really to do or say. It was incredibly scary.
And in that scary moment, we're not just talking about physical abuse, which is also scary for a woman, with another powerful figure being a man, but also sexual abuse. We're talking two types of abuse here. And while all this was happening, Kim, it had to have been very difficult. Not only were these things happening in the car, they were driving fast, they were being loud. How were you being observant of your surroundings so you could try to potentially cry for help or have a way out? Or was it just too much going on in the hysteria that you couldn't see where you guys were headed?
Well, I really was trying to look out the window if I could to see, and there were a few things I did recognize, signs, and at least that helped us during the investigation to know the pathway they had taken because these were roads that I had not been on and was not familiar with. But I could tell for a while we were in the city. It was very urban, and then on the highway. And at one point, they did stop. They took an exit. I was, complaining and claiming I needed to use the restroom and please let me out of the car. I need to go to the bathroom. And I heard them saying something about let's get some more beer. So they pulled off at one point on a rural rural exit, and I got out. They unhandcuffed me for a minute to use the bathroom, and of course I had to do it right there in front of them. And I tried to run at that point. I realized when they were getting beer, they were kind of distracted, and so I tried to run, and that just fueled them with rage, and they tackled me and pulled me back in the car. And so from that moment on, they really were holding me down in the back seat. I think so that I couldn't get anyone's attention as we were driving, and they drove another 45 minutes or so. Again, I was not sure where we were or what direction, and that's added to the fear. Just not sure where I was and how I was ever going to get out of the situation.
Yeah, I can only imagine 45 minutes is already long, but 45 minutes plus fear and plus trying to escape and being abused physically and sexually, that probably felt like the longest ride ever.
It did. And, I think to add to the humiliation and the fear, at one point, I remember the window going down and my clothes were thrown out. And, to be in the back seat of this car naked and with these men, they were joking about that and laughing. I was trying to plead to like the ringleader, Kenneth Thornburg, on that I was human and that if he would just let me get away, I wouldn't tell, and just begging for my life, honestly begging.
Yeah.
And he would calm for a minute and kind of whisper, "It's okay, I'll let you get away." And then he would get this sinister look. He would stare out the window, and then he would turn and say, "No, I'm going to keep you forever." And um, in my mind, I was just trying to maintain calm. I knew that if I was hysterical, they would continue to beat me, and I knew if I was trying to be aggressive back, that they would harm me. So these situations, you don't know what the right thing to do is, but what I've shared and been honored to share with survivors throughout the years is whatever you did in the moment was the right thing because you survived. And I think people try to say, well, why didn't you run, or why didn't you do this, or why didn't you tell someone if abuse is going on in the home or with family? You're doing what you need to do to survive, to what you think you can do to escape the situation, and that we need to honor that for survivors.
Absolutely. It's definitely easier said than done. A lot of people can have an opinion on what could have happened or what you could have said. But being in that environment with fear and all these details of your story, literally, like you said, it was the best decision for you at the time in those decisions. So I definitely agree with you. Now let's talk about this turning point in your story, Kim. Where did they end up taking you? Was there a final destination to where you could probably see an escape route?
Yes, about, I know now that it was an hour and a half or so down the road. I didn't know then. But the light started to dawn. There was, the sun was emerging a little bit on the horizon, and they pulled down a country road and kind of back into a treed area off of the road and hid the car. They all got out and they dragged me out immediately, pushing me down onto the rocks and assaulting me right then. And all four of them at that point, the driver and the one in the passenger seat got out as well. And again, they were laughing and drinking and yelling, and it was so chaotic. It was the gang environment where one is fueling the other, and that's also where it's something like you can never understand. You don't know what's going to happen and who's going to fuel and drive one to do something. And that's what happened. One of the offenders wasn't able to, kind of engage in the assaults at the moment. And so he dragged me to a wooded area, I guess, away from them. They were teasing him, and he began to get very violent, choked me, strangled me till I really was unconscious for a bit. And then I would kind of come back, and then they were hovering around. And, you think now from a movie perspective or a bird's eye point of view, and you see that violence going on. And I think at some point I did kind of rise out of my body, just as a survival technique, not wanting to let that assault and abuse happen to my soul and my spirit. Somehow knowing that that was my body, but I was trying to just get my spirit out of there if I could. And a while after that, they dragged me down underneath a creek, underneath a bridge. People began to, I think, leave for work, so they were driving down the road where we were parked, and so they were trying to hide me. And then that's when they handcuffed me to the metal underneath the bridge. And so I was just kind of hanging there, and they went off to do some additional talking or planning. Shortly after that, the driver left with the car, and the other three assailants came down underneath the bridge again. And, I said, "What is happening? Where did he go? Where's the car?" And, they were just yelling at me and cussing at me and teasing me and just trying to, I think, upset me. And so, of course, I was just crying, and they assaulted me again. And then they went up to the top of the bridge. And I'll never forget, I saw, all of a sudden saw these pieces of paper falling, and I couldn't figure out at first what it was, but it was things from my work, my purse, and my wallet. They were throwing them down into the water. It was pictures of friends and pictures of family members that I carried in my wallet. And, it's an odd thing, but somehow that got me so deep, because that they were bringing those loved ones into this moment. And I remember yelling at them to stop and just trying to cry out, and how dare you do this to me, but also bring my family members in. Those pictures are precious to me, I was saying. And they were laughing. And then they disappeared for a little while. And I just was there under that bridge. And, the water of the creek was just kind of a soothing sound. And I looked up and I could see the trees rustling and hear the birds. And I was just trying to understand how I could merge this horrible situation and moment and the violence that had occurred into who I was in my life and the future. And was trying to think, how am I ever going to get out of this situation alive? But I knew I had to. I knew my family probably didn't even know what had happened. I was living alone. I was about to turn 20, and I had moved out, so I was living alone. And I thought, I can't just disappear like this. They would never know. And that gave me some energy to continue to fight, and to continue to want my life.
Yeah, and I know just hearing that gives me chills. You had a second. It could have been a little bit longer, but to speak to the higher power and to speak, and then you were around nature. So that alone, hearing the water and just the trees, it sounded like that was giving you life again and energy and power, to not give up. That's what I hear within your stories, that you were fighting and fighting and you didn't give up. And I know you did not give up, because you're here with us today. And I think that is very, very powerful. There's a lot of great points that you were kind of talking about there, that you restored your hope. And then at that time, they left you under the bridge. When did they come back? Or did they just leave you there? at that time?
The three offenders that were still there came back under the bridge and took the handcuffs, undid the handcuffs, handcuffed me to one of the offenders again, and said, "Come on, we're going towards this barn." And I didn't, have any shoes on or clothes. And I remember crying out in pain just as they were yanking me through all of that. And so one of the offenders tried to give me his shoes, and there were moments where I could see their humanity, and I again was trying to connect with that, trying to somehow remind them that I was a human. And I even said several times, if you just let me go, I won't tell. I'll just go, and you can go back to wherever you are, live. And I really felt like I was bargaining with them. But they dragged me across this field, and it was quite a ways. I look back now, and I don't have a good memory of that. And even through the investigators that I dealt with afterwards, they share about how far that really was. But we finally reached this barn, and it had started to rain. And I felt grateful that there was some coverage because it was starting to rain pretty hard. And, you brought something up, those moments where I chose to connect to something that gave me hope, really was a choice. And that's a skill I've tried to use in recovery and in overcoming, because it is about a choice often. And finding hope in those moments. As we approached the barn, something amazing happened. I was, being drugged by one of the offenders, and I looked down and I caught a glimpse of this buckle. It was a tattered metal, and I picked it up, and I could tell that it was a bridle buckle that would go on like the reins of a horse, and it had a heart on it, and it spoke so clearly to my heart that I was not alone, that if I could just hold on. I was a new Christian at the time, and I didn't know a lot about, really what living a faith-filled life meant. But something very clearly, I knew that this wasn't what was meant for my life. I believed that. And so I believe this was the actions of someone that was hurting me. And that heart buckle showed me that there could be hope. And I held on to it. And surprisingly, they let me hold on to it. And it's been a real treasure for me throughout my life to clearly see how real things are when you are willing to look at them. And, this barn had been abandoned for years. There was, dead carcasses in there, a lot of old hay with rats and snakes. And, it was a scary place in itself when they pulled me into it. But I had this little emblem of hope tucked, in my hand, and I leaned on that a lot.
Yeah, I love to hear that you chose to see certain signs, and you changed it for the positive. As negative as that environment was, as dark as that environment was, you even said snakes and rats. You still hung on to that hope, that little bit of ounce, and that probably just filled your heart back up, literally your heart back up to gain some type of energy. And so that is something beautiful to hear about your story. I know at this moment in time, you were saying the sun was coming up. It started at night. You were working, long day at work. The sun was coming up. So right there, you went through the whole night. Your body was already exhausted. You felt probably drained, but you found something to build yourself back up. And coming to the finale of this, you went into the barn, and then I want you to kind of talk a little bit about what happened in that barn, to really get your courage to find an option out.
Sure. You're right. This is like a turning point. We go into the barn, it's the three of them. I look around and I see, all this horror, these snakes and these rats climbing through the hay and spider webs and this old abandoned barn. And they tell me to, cross over this patch of hay and go up into this hayloft. And I just crumbled, and I'm like, I can't go through that. There are rats and snakes, and they just kind of pushed me out into it. And it felt so mean. And I know that sounds strange when everything they had already done to me. uh, was horrendous, but that moment, it was just felt so mean. And so I climbed up the ladder, and they had undone the handcuff from one of the offenders at that point. It was still hanging on my wrist. So I climbed up the loft, and they climbed up behind me, handcuffed me there to one of the old, rickety beams in the barn, and they began to assault me again. And my body was just, it was just so in pain and bleeding, and I just cried out, "Stop!" I'm just like, I can't take this again. You have to stop. And I was just sobbing, and so they climbed down the loft. I was really surprised, and I was just praying. And then the two that appeared to be the ringleaders, the ones I knew later had criminal records and had kind of encouraged this event to happen. They all went outside for a while, and I heard talking, and I was trying to listen through the old wooden beams of the barn. The light would shine through where there were not holes and where the beams weren't together, and I was trying to listen. And then I remember just seeing the light and thinking, I just have to try to be, maybe they'll all leave, maybe they'll just leave me there. And so I was just hoping that maybe they would decide to run off and just leave me. Two of the men did leave, and I learned they hitchhiked back down to the town where the driver was, and they stole his car. He went to work after he left that area. So the last offender was there, and he climbed up into the hayloft. He laid down and handcuffed himself to me, and we were on like metal roofing. It was ridged metal roofing, if you can kind of imagine what that looks like. And so it wasn't really stable up there. And anytime one of us would move, it would shift, and it would move. So I thought to myself, this is the time I'm going to have to get away. I don't know how I get out of these handcuffs. But I woke him up at one point and said, I have to go to the bathroom. And so we climbed down the loft and went outside, and he loosened the cuff enough for me to kind of lean away from him, as you can imagine how humiliating that is. And then tightened it back up, and we climbed back up into the loft. And as he laid down, he began to breathe really deep, and I could tell that he was falling into a deep sleep. And I just was breathing, trying to be calm, but my heart was racing. I thought, this is going to be the time. This is when I have to try to escape. And so I grabbed the cuff with one hand. The other wrist was inside the cuff, and I just began to twist and turn. And, I think I realized that if I just slowly and methodically rotated it, that I could pull my hand out. And by the grace of God, I have small wrists, and so that's exactly what happened. I kept thinking that he was going to wake up at any moment and see that I was, escaping. So there was just a level of fear and terror that, again, it's hard to really put words to. And that's so, that's been something that's hung in my heart all these years, because I see things on the news and I hear about experiences that people have gone through. And when they talk about those really intense moments, I understand differently than most viewers or someone hearing it. I feel it and I know. And so it's a burden, but it's also a blessing, because again, by sharing it and joining with someone in that moment, we're somehow united in strength and not in that weakness of being in there alone. So, again, by the grace of God, I pulled my wrist out and I realized that I was free from the handcuff, and there was not a way I could jump over him and go down. I didn't want to go back down into that hay pit where all those, just where all that was. So I jumped out of the loft. I kind of leaned myself over on the beam, pulled myself, and then I jumped down and turned and expected him to be leaping after me, and he wasn't. He was still asleep. So I hid for a minute. I vomited, tried to get my bearings, figure out where I was, tried to see if there was anything nearby. But honestly, I didn't know where the other offenders went. I didn't know if they were nearby, if they were hiding, they were going to catch me. And so it was really, intense is the only word I can think of to use. But I hid again for a while. I saw a house in the distance and I ran towards it. Again, I learned later from the investigator who has become a dear friend of mine, that I went through a wide creek and muddy area, and I just was going for my life and in survival mode. And I came to the house and I saw toys outside and things, and I remember thinking, I didn't want to knock on the door. I was just afraid to disrupt life for whomever it was in that home.
Wow. So I know as you're telling this story, and I know viewers could probably side with that, my heart is racing. My heart is getting fear when you said I was able to break through on my wrist. And I literally I can imagine just me putting myself in your shoes. Oh my goodness. Is he gonna wake up? Am I gonna get caught again? Like that right there was your little ounce of hope to leave, to run as fast as you can with the little energy that you had. I'm feeling it through, this show. And so I can't even imagine the level of emotions that you felt once you broke free, but you didn't know if that was going to be free to where you get help or free just for that time being. So tell us about when you knocked on that door. What happened? And did they receive you with open arms? What happened at that point?
Yeah, I smiled because, again, that's where the gifts came in and the hope. The door opened and I was crying and I just said, I need help. And there was a woman there and like a little housecoat kind of thing. And she immediately embraced me and said, come in, honey. And she wrapped something around me and I collapsed in her arms. And, I knew I was safe. And she said, what do you need? And of course, we called my parents right away. And then we called the police, and the sheriffs came out to her house along with the ambulance, and they responded really quickly out to help us.
Wow. I'm so happy that house was right there, probably was miles away. But if that house wasn't there, you wouldn't have gotten help. You probably wouldn't have either had water, food, etc. So very thankful for that being at the right place and at the right time. We know how difficult this may be to share these details on how they violated your most intimate privacies. And Kim, I just want to tell you, thank you for sharing your story. I know it's tough to relive it. It takes courage to relive it to potentially help someone else. So now, if you allow me, I want to go a little bit deeper on those feelings after, the experience that was, gruesome at that time being. And I don't know how many hours, but it almost sounds like it could have been 6 hours, just give or take. And now comes the help. Now comes the battle mentally. Now comes all of that I kind of want you to uncover to see if maybe it can also help a viewer. And so just kind of starting off there, when you went to the police, were you able to give all details, like from description? Were you able to remember everything? Or was there kind of a mental block at that point?
Mm. Yeah, that was difficult. I really had not been around law enforcement, and so that alone was scary and intimidating to me. It was in about the 15th hour that I escaped. So we were heading into 16 hours now. And when they showed up at the house, the sheriff in his sheriff gear and his sheriff hat, and he had handcuffs and things on him. And I remember the sound of all of that and seeing those was very triggering to me. I didn't know what words to put on it at the time, but I think it was re-traumatizing and caused some fear. So I also felt for some reason like I needed to live up to what I had said to them about, if I get away, I won't say anything. And so that part is very difficult because I didn't right away tell the police the true facts. I said something about the car being red and it was actually blue. I said they had left and gone one direction when I knew they went the other. I felt as if I needed to live up to, what I had said. And I know now as a professional in the field that is, a trauma bond, or what they have called Stockholm syndrome, where you are somehow bonded in in that, victimization with them, and there is some sort of an alliance. But it didn't take me very long to step out of that and to unpack that and realize that, oh, these law enforcement officers were there to help me, and that I needed to share information so they could get those offenders arrested and off of the street before they assaulted someone else or did something. They had meant for harm. They had meant to do this when they left their homes that night, and so they were out to kill someone.
Yeah,
But
and
oh, go ahead.
go ahead. Sorry.
No, I just, what happened next for me was so encouraging, because instantly the sheriff's office brought in, two wonderful investigators that were so compassionate. A woman who had gone to some recent training around this topic, and a man who just so compassionate. And they spent hours and hours with me, just hearing every detail. And as I recalled, every assault, every move we made, every word they had said, every tattoo on their body. We had, some tough moments, a lot of tears, some laughter, even in those early moments of investigation, but we were in it together, and they did a very good job at letting me know they were there for me and that we were going to get through this. Unfortunately, this had happened in 3 different jurisdictions or counties, and so they were going to try it and investigate it separately with each offender in each county. So it was quite a hurdle in the criminal justice system. I escaped the assault, but I was stepping into this maze of the system, which brought on a whole entirely different set of difficulties.
Wow, that has to be tough too. Just after experiencing in that, and I'm sorry you said 16 hours of going through. Again, I want to remind you guys, physical and sexual abuse, and then you were able to give as much detail as possible and having a vulnerable heart. I know a lot of viewers are probably wondering what happened to those 4 men. Are they in jail? Did they get life? Like, what happened to hold them accountable for what they did to you?
Yeah, they all were apprehended. The man that I escaped from, he was caught pretty quickly, and he gave up the names of the others. They went and arrested the driver from work, was at his work, and the other 2 that had stolen his car, they drove to Florida, and they were arrested about 4 or 5 days later. They had run a stop sign in Kissimmee, Florida, and I'm so grateful for law enforcement that day. They were doing their job, and they saw and pulled them over for that. And then fortunately we were able to bring conclusion to this. But we did have about 4.5, 5 years of prosecution through all counties, and they're all still in prison. I've had 7 parole hearings. I have another one coming up soon in September. One of the offenders has a parole date, which is tragic because he was the ringleader. He had previous criminal history, but because of the sentence or the way the system is, he has been able to be released, and I think one more will follow soon. So again, just because that was done, the criminal justice system at that stage, the post-conviction stage, holds a lot of difficulties for survivors as well.
Wow. That's, first of all, it's good to hear that they are all in jail. I know, do you go to those parole hearings so that they could still see your face, or you kind of stay away as far as possible?
I do attend. After this incident, the counselor I was working with was very progressive in the victims' rights movement, particularly here in Missouri. And, I think, again, it's part of the story for me that's been able to allow me to rewrite a different story, because she was an advocate, and she was working to do some legislative change to give victims rights in the criminal justice system, and particularly in Missouri. So I joined the efforts as a way of processing this event, and began to use my voice to share what I call the good, the bad, and the ugly around the system. Again, not as a blame or not to bring shame to anyone that I've dealt with. It was just as an opportunity to continue to do things better and learn. And so we passed the constitutional amendment, which gave victims rights. And one of those rights is to be present at the parole hearing, to have a voice. And so for me, I've always felt like even though it brings it all back to the surface, it disrupts my life. I have to relive it. It's important for me to exercise that right. And so I go to the hearings, I make a statement. I don't see the offender. There's usually a partition, or now we do it through video conferencing. I can see the offender, but he cannot see me. And so that has been a way for me to continue to find strength and know that I ultimately still have a voice in the process.
Yeah, and that's very powerful, Kim, and I commend you for still going, standing strong and tall through not just what you went through, but even afterwards to ensure that they hear your statements. Speaking of power, I want to empower you just really quickly from some comments of our live viewers so that you can, feel that level of hope again and restore your energy right now. So I do have Darren saying, "You are so brave, Kim. I can't believe how evil this world can be. Thank you for sharing your story. We appreciate you so much." We have Chriselle saying, "Thank you for sharing your story. Sharing your testimony is beyond courageous." Maria saying, "I'm speechless. Even during the darkest moments, she kept choosing hope. My heart goes out to you, Kim." Giselle saying, "My heart is with you, Kim. You are so brave and your faith is so strong. You are truly an inspiration." Debbie saying, "You are so strong and brave, and I'm so blessed to have you as my sister. I love you dearly." And Tasha saying, "I miss working on these kind of cases, Kim. You are a brave soul." So I wanted to give you some empowering words. I saw the comments and I'm like, there's just no way I can't let her know and really give you some of those words of encouragement of people that are watching currently right now.
Thank you. Yeah, I
Yeah,
appreciate that very much.
absolutely. So now we're going to kind of uncover the after the crime happened and the abuse and the physical. Did it ever cross your mind, Kim? Why me?
Yeah. Yes. You know, even recently, honestly, Mari, I mean, you look at life and you see how things have unfolded. And I think, why was this my path? And what was I meant to do with this? And, I've tried to step into it in a place of power and joy. But there are times where I've had to own up to the fact that that wasn't fair. And I was working with a dear man in Nashville once, and we were working through a statement to make if I ever did any mediation with one of the offenders. And, he really pushed me to acknowledge that it hasn't been fair. But I think sometimes I stop and realize that, just like you can't have a rainbow without rain, you can't really truly know joy and hope and and perseverance without going through something difficult, without seeing those dark clouds. So while at the same time, I wish that maybe it would have been different, I think it's also been quite an honor to carry this because the path did take me into advocacy. And I've worked with so many hundreds and hundreds of special souls and professionals in the field that are fighting for their rights every day. And it's just an immense way to have connected with humanity and to know the things that are truly important. And I live in that every day, never taking anything for granted. And that is a special lot in life, I really do believe.
Yeah, I know that has to be, a hard question that you probably asked yourself then and you had a certain answer. And then even now, when you ask yourself, your answer is probably totally different because of the journey that you've taken. But I will say you have a purpose in this life, Kim, and it's not just your story that you were resilient and strong and powerful, but there's so many other lives that you're helping just by telling the story, but also in your path right now. And we're going to kind of uncover that here shortly. So, whenever you were telling your story, and you've had to tell your story for various reasons, it could the reason could be different. Have you ever felt like no one was going to believe you in your story and why you were there? Basically, you were at the wrong place at the wrong time. Do you feel like no one was going to believe you when you told them your story?
I did. I definitely did. And there's also the shame that goes along with this type of experience when you wonder, what could I have done differently that would have, not made this happen? And even though they were four offenders out to do harm, even by being there and being out late or all those things, you think, what did I do that I could have done differently? And so I really have tried to speak that into people's lives where I know they've gone through experiences like this, that, everything they did has kept them alive, and that again, the blame goes on the offender. But for me, I do see that this could have gone differently, but the way that I've been able to work with people has been a gift that has resulted from it.
Yeah. And I think you said something that I really want to highlight for those that are watching and or have experienced it. Sexual abuse. The blame goes on the offender. I want to be very clear with that because there is a lot of stories that I've heard that the blame gets taken by the individual. And no one deserves to go through anything like this, big or small, and to where this story, you could take little pieces or you could take more of this. And some people, Kim, because you've worked in this environment, didn't even make it out. There was homicides and there's been deaths. So I definitely want to highlight the blame is on the offender. And I want to ask you this, either at the time when you were 20, at now, or in between, did you feel alone and how did you overcome that?
Yes, this, has been a journey where not a lot of people understand. And there were years of my life where I kept this to myself. I worked in advocacy, and people knew that I had a passion and a compassion for the system and helping people through it, but never really knowing why. And when one of the documentaries came out um, some of my friends that I knew pretty well didn't know. And it was difficult because I think they felt somehow like, why didn't I trust them enough to share? And it wasn't that, it was that I didn't want to be known and defined by this in every area of my life. So in a way, I kept it to myself for that reason. But everyone has had so much love and encouragement around it. But for me, I did want to hide it for a while. And, being at that age where you're just out of high school, you're just starting your life, all of my friends were doing their own things, going away to college. And it was hard to have relationships, because I had this big thing in my life, and even my own, family and my father, my brother, that were difficult for them. And so, no, it's hard to know what to say. And I'll be honest, I don't know that I have the answer for that. People have asked me that through the years, but what I do know is being in that with them, even if you're silent, speaks volumes. Just by listening, just by being in the same room, just by doing the things that bring them joy. I bring them a pizza, or allow them to hang out, and now it would be watch Netflix or one of those things. But do things that enable that person to feel normal, because it was really challenging for my family to know what to do and what to say. But I think that, again, just by being there and believing is the biggest thing in so many of these situations, um, and just being willing to understand and meet them where they are.
Yeah, I know you talked about three main things I'm picking up of how you overcame that is you had people around, they believed you, they made you feel normal. That's probably the best way for you that you were able to get through this process and not feel alone. Now, I want you to dig a little bit deeper and walk us through the day you began your healing process and how you picked up the pieces and found hope again.
I've always had that heart buckle with me, and in my life, and I would even show it to you now, but I've put it in such a safe place that I can't even find it right now. So I know I have it, but it's in a very safe place.
Yeah.
Um, but it's those types of things. I see hearts in everything all the time. Even my friends, my young friends, my little nieces and friends will send pictures. Oh, here's a potato chip that looks like a heart. I thought of you, Aunt Kimmy, or I'll see a leaf, or things like that. That reminds me that there is so much more in this world. And again, that it's up to me to step back into the story that was originally meant for me, and not to be afraid to live a life full of joy. So I think for me, finding hope and realizing that I could live life as I chose from there forward was basically when the system and the processes were wrapping up. And that's hard because some people don't have the opportunity to go through the processes. And that's why, you know, firms like D. Miller, where they're willing to step back into that and bring restoration or accountability on another side, even if the criminal justice system wasn't able to meet that need and find justice, whatever that looks like for that individual person. But being willing to go through that process is a catharsis. But I remember looking in the mirror one day and I just saw, tears, and I didn't recognize myself. And I thought, is this really, am I giving my power away to them again? Am I choosing to give my power away, or am I going to choose to live my life and really find joy? And so, through my faith and through friendships and just things like gardening or being outside, that's allowed me to step into it. And then the advocacy, where I realized that people need support and need help. And if we could shore up the systems, uh, develop programs where there were advocates in different parts of the system, in law enforcement, prosecutors, in local shelters and things, that gave people hope and gave them a voice. And so I really enjoyed doing it. And that's kind of what I set my life out to do.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because I want to kind of touch base on that, on how you're being a voice for those that currently don't have a voice or never thought they would be believed. What programs are you a part of, or what are you doing right now, maybe projects or campaigns to give hope to those that have been through this as far as sexual abuse or even physical abuse? Because I know you definitely are a huge support system for either one of those
Yeah.
situations.
You know, um, It's really been a great honor. You said earlier that there are people, that lost their voice because they were murdered, and there's people that have lost their voice because they've just not been believed or because they've not been able to disclose. And now I think now more than ever with Me Too movement and Time's Up, it's up to us to reclaim that power. And so I love being a part of program development. I've worked in law enforcement at the state level and then at the federal level, like with the FBI, we created a program to serve law enforcement agencies by creating victim services programs for them and mentoring them. And that was a really honorable program that I got to be a part of developing. My work with D. Miller and Associates is amazing to be able to offer advocacy. And I can't wait to talk more about that in the future. But on a local level, I'm very involved in nonprofits. I serve on the board like Show Me Christian Youth Home, for example, which gives a place and a home for marginalized kids where they have faced victimizations, they face losses. They're not in the system yet as far as the juvenile system or, in the child welfare system, but someone's willing to step alongside them and give them hope. And so I try to pour into those types of programs that are innovative and progressive to show that together, even just saying, I'm with you and I believe you, uh, is really a way to offer hope.
Wow, Kim, you are an amazing woman. Everything you're doing, offer, put yourself in those shoes to be an advocate to other survivors is powerful. This whole show, you have my heart beating so fast. And I just can't thank you enough for sharing. I do want to empower you again. We do have some great comments here. We have Daniel saying, so brave, strong, and inspirational. Thank you so much for sharing your story. Is there any resources you can share with us? Perhaps a viewer watching is going through a similar situation.
Yeah, that's terrific. I really like the RAIN program that you can easily find online. It is a great resource. It's the Rape and Incest Abuse Network, and they do a lot of work at the national level and at the local level as well to empower survivors. And there is a speakers bureau where people are able to have a voice and share their statements, share their testimonies. And they also do advocacy, things like that. I really appreciate we have at the federal level a victims of crime organization that funds and brings to light programs locally through all kinds of different mechanisms that offer help to survivors. And I'm really interested in faith-based programs as well, because that's a vehicle where often people disclose to pastors or to church groups or to women's groups or men's groups. And in light of the new allegations with various clergy and Boy Scouts. And I think it's imperative that we are willing to talk about these situations, as dark as they are and as difficult, just like what you're doing, bringing light to this with your terrific series of explaining what it is and why it happens and how to get help, and then letting me share my message. Really appreciate that. It's a way that we can get people talking. It's not something that's behind closed doors, and it's not happening in other people's families. It's happening all along our blocks and our neighborhoods. And now more than ever with COVID, where we're all home and there's not as many chances for children per se to get support and help. We need to be on the lookout. We need to be aware, and we need to be willing to address the situation when it arises.
Yes, I definitely agree. I know right now we're all experiencing difficult times. And just in case you guys didn't hear that, there is a program she recommended, which is the RAIN program. We'll put it on the comment section so that way you guys can see. We do provide resources if need be. Kim is a part of our team, and we provide any resource that can help a survivor. So please just send us a direct message, and we'll be more than happy to send the proper help as needed. We have two more comments. One is Carmen saying, "You are and have always been the strongest person that I have ever known. You have helped me and so many others get through and move on with their lives. I am blessed to call you my friend, sister, love you." And I have Sandy saying, "So very proud and continue to be amazed by you, Kim." So you do have a strong support system, whether they know you or they don't. Just hearing your story is courageous, Kim. And I want to leave our viewers with a piece of advice or words that you would leave them with. This includes for those that have been through something similar or may know of someone. You have beautiful words. I know you did have a turning point in your life, but you turned that turning point into something positive. So share with our viewers a piece of advice that you would like to leave them with.
Yes, thank you. I have a couple. I think number one, work to keep yourself mentally healthy. Do things that feed your spirit and your soul, whether you have a faith in God or in energy or in the universe or in just nature. Lean into that. Allow that to fill you up. I know that to be a way of healing, a path of healing. Reach out to friends and develop relationships that you can trust. And I was reading today as I was kind of preparing and doing some meditating, and I came across some words that I think are so important. But to sum it up, it's something like, let's not look at where the worry, fear, and negative is. Let's look towards the hope and the future. And I shared it with one of our attorneys, Andy, and he reminded me of a quote that's, if you're driving and you are going into a wreck and you're looking that way, you're going to go right into the wreck. But if you're looking the other way as a pathway out, that's the way you're going to be going. So I think it's imperative to sum up those very not quite quoted correctly quotes, is that we have to look to the hope. We have to look to the future. We have to look at what we want out of life and what we believe for ourselves and put our focus there. And it's so difficult because I know, as well as many of you, the darkness and how that can consume you with the hurt. But it does come down to a daily choice. It comes down to the choice I had to make to break free from that handcuffs. And it's the choice that I have to make every day when I wake up knowing this has happened in my life, but that I still want to live in a place of positivity and receive the grace and to find love and to be joyful. And so, we have to be moving towards that way of life rather than looking into the pain all the time. There's a quote by Rumi, something like, the wounds and the cracks are how the light gets in. But once you allow that light to come in, you have to be willing to stand in it and own it.
Wow, that's powerful. I love your words, and just the last thing you said gave me chills, because you just said, "Let the light in from the cracks." I'm not quoting you. I'm paraphrasing, and that's exactly what happened at the end of your story when you were in the barn and the light was coming in. It's exactly what you felt, and you got hope. So I want to thank you, Kim. Just sharing your story is courageous. I know it's definitely tough to relive your story, But we all, on behalf of D. Miller and Associates, want to thank you for sharing it. All our viewers want to thank you for sharing it because we know how difficult that this can be. We're all with you and support you, and we're all sending you a big, tight COVID hug.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So I want to remind everyone that you're not alone in your journey and to reach out for help, especially sexual abuse survivors. Special guest sexual abuse survivor Kim Case, thank you again for coming on our show, special series Sexual Abuse, Human Trafficking, and revealing your story to us. It means a lot that you trust us and we're willing to be transparent today. We will definitely be walking along your side of your journey going forward. I know we do have special announcements coming in the next month of a project that we're going to do with you in regards to something that's similar to what we're doing now. So you guys definitely need to be on the lookout. I want to conclude by telling everyone sexual abuse refers to any type of sexual activity or touching when consent is not given. This impacts every community amongst all genders, sexual orientations, and ages, predominantly in women. Nearly 1 in every 3 women and nearly 1 in every 4 men have experienced sexual abuse during their lifetime. The way we begin to try to put an end to this is by educating our community on how to recognize signs and how to be aware. If someone you know have been through this, some form of sexual abuse, please reach out and get the proper help. I want to thank you all for tuning in and for sharing this special show. Be a part of the conversation by liking and commenting on this video. The more we spread the knowledge, the more likely we are to help someone that's in need. Until next time.
Human trafficking is a world ability and action will be crucial to saving our communities. The wrath of human trafficking crosses gender lines, ethnicities, and all age groups. Traffickers and abusers want you to feel as though you are alone, hopeless, worthless, but you are fighters. You are strong. You are survivors. You are worth everything. You are not alone. Let us give you a voice. A simple phone call will get you the help that you deserve, the help that you need. We will ensure that we are with you every step of the way. The team of attorneys at D. Miller and Associates, PLLC, is ready to fight for you, to change your life, to change the community, and to change the world. Let us be your voice. Give us a call at 713-850-8600.